Hi folks. So today I want to talk to you about the nerves of the upper extremity, and not all of them, but some important nerves of the upper extremity. And picking a few to focus on is a good way to start practicing thinking about how nerves branch and connect and innervate different things, and how the downstream connections and the upstream connections, or rather what they serve downstream and where they serve things upstream, this can start to inform things like referred pain, where you can feel phantom sensations from different locations that are further down or up a nerve. Something, again, that we will talk about later chapters of the class. So before we look at some specific nerves of the upper extremity, let's talk about a little bit about how nerves branch away from the spinal cord. So I'm going to put up a picture here. And this is just a picture of nerves leaving the spinal cord that's running along that vertebral column. And you'll notice that they come out in these clusters. And these clusters are called plexi or plexuses. And a nerve plexus is this interconnecting web of nerves. And sort of like the interconnections help provide alternate routes so that if one part gets damaged, there's other ways for the signal to travel. And so we can loosely divide all of our nerves into several important plexi, which we will talk about at various points in this class. The cervical plexus is up in the neck. The brachial plexus is the plexus of nerves that serves the arms, the brachium. Then we have a bunch of intercostal nerves. That means between the ribs. These are going to serve many of the organs in the abdomen and thorax. Then we have the lumbar plexus. This is the originating from the lumbar vertebrae or the lower back. The sacral plexus, which is originating from the sacrum at the very tailbone, very bottom of the back. And the lumbar plexus and sacral plexus primarily serve the legs. So we'll be talking about them next anatomy unit. We'll be talking about cervical plexus when we talk about the head, and we'll be talking about the intercostal nerves when we talk about the thorax. But for now, let's look at this brachial plexus. So what you need to know about the brachial plexus in general is it's located in the neck and axilla. What does axilla mean? Well, that basically refers to the armpit or the armpit region. I like to remember axillary equals armpit by thinking of Axe deodorant. So the neck and kind of upper armpit shoulder region is where our brachial plexus occurs. It gives rise to nearly all of the nerves that innervate the brachium, the arm. And in fact, usually the brachium refers to the upper arm, and we have the Antebrachium as the forearm, but we're going to group them all together. So now that we have that web in place, let's take a closer look at some of the nerves of the arm. And you can go in and learn to label how these branch off of this brachial plexus, but I don't find that useful, at least at this point in your anatomy lessons. So I'm going to focus on when you see the nerve running through the arm, can you identify key nerves based on their position as they run through the arm? And fortunately, the name of the nerve usually tells you something about where it's going to be in the arm, what parts of the arm it's going to be serving. So let's take a closer look at some of those. So nerves and nerve diagrams are one of the areas where I think the figures in your OpenStax textbook currently aren't really up to snuff. So I really recommend going and Googling nerves of the arm or, nerve body models and things like that to get a better overview of how the nerves branch out into the body. And so this is a figure that came up when I just Googled nerves of the arm. And it's great because it provides a view of, we would be coming out of the brachial plexus here, and here are two important nerves coming along the anterior of the arm. And then here's an important sounds like a Looney Tunes character. Here's an important nerve that's coming and wrapping around to the posterior side of the arm. And all of these three important nerves can be named based loosely on where they are and where they run. So one of the first nerves I'm going to ask you about, and we'll look at it again later, is the axillary nerve. That is not on this diagram, but based on its name, you probably have a general guess where you would find it, and that would be up in the armpit region, and you would be correct. It would be kind of branching out right up around here in the range of that armpit. So we'll talk about that one on a different diagram, but for now, let's look at three important nerves: the median nerve, the ulnar nerve, and the radial nerve. So median means middle. So let's guess that this nerve is going to run through the median portion of the arm, through the middle of the arm. And of these three nerves you can see here, this one right up along the top is median to the arm. It's running along the anterior of the arm, right in the middle. So that's your median nerve. You can see that it runs along the humerus, then sort of in the middle, a little closer to the radius, and then serves this left or thumb side of the hand. I don't know why I called that left. It would depend on which part of your hand you were looking at. So this nerve passes through the brachium here en route to the antebrachium, the forearm, and it doesn't actually innervate anything within this brachium. It only innervates stuff downstream. You can see here it'll have some forearm signals and some signals here on this thumb side of the hand. And that's really all I want you to know about it. We could look at more detail, but those are the key take-homes. Now, a little more inwards to the arm, medial to the body, and running along the ulna, we have the ulnar nerve. And this one gets its name because it's literally following the ulna right here. So the ulnar nerve is more medial to the body, not median within the middle of the arm or intermediate in the arm. It's on the medial side of the arm close to the body, and it's following that ulna, which is our medial bone. So again, we come from that brachial plexus, and then the ulnar nerve innervates the flexor muscles. And it makes sense, therefore, that it would be on the anterior side of the forearm, because you remember those anterior compartment muscles of the forearm are going to be on the correct side of the bone. Everything on this anterior side of the arm is on the correct side of the bone to do flexion, because we're going to be able to bend these joints shorter. So the ulnar nerve innervates your flexor muscles. So which nerve is on the opposite side to get our extensor muscles and straighten that arm back out, extend it? Well, let's look at the posterior side of the arm. And here we have, wrapping around the humerus and following along the posterior side of the radius, we have the radial nerve. So ulnar nerve's following the ulna, and the radial nerve follows the posterior side of the radius. This nerve is going to be able to innervate the extensor muscles. It will also innervate some flexor muscles, and it will innervate the brachioradialis. That's not surprising, because the brachioradialis, remember, starts up here on the brachium and follows the radius. And it's one of our only arm muscles, upper arm muscles, that runs mostly through the forearm rather than mostly through the upper arm. It provides that really strong whip-like pulling point by pulling on the far end of the radius. So our brachioradialis, and this nerve is following the length of that brachioradialis and the length of that radius, so it's a good nerve to innervate that. And meanwhile, let's go ahead and talk about what this median nerve is doing in a little more detail. It's in a similar location to that ulnar nerve, so it's also going to be able to innervate flexor muscle groups in the forearm, and some of the intrinsic internal muscles of the hand. Just what we said. So here we're on the anterior side of the arm. That's usually flexion. And here we're on the posterior side. That's usually extension. But we do have some things like the brachioradialis. That does flexion of the upper arm. And we do have some flexion muscles of the lower arm, some flexors of the Antebrachium also involved. You can see that, for example, it comes out into the hand tear. As an interesting point about your ulnar nerve, you can see that this one's kind of in a vulnerable location. See how it dips under the edge of the humerus here and like right where that point of the elbow is? If you've ever banged your elbow and gone, ow, oh my gosh, and felt like radiating tingles from banging your ulna or your elbow, that's your ulnar nerve you just hit. It's in a little bit of an exposed location right here. So when you bang your elbow or your funny bone and you feel those radiating tingles, you'll notice they tend to follow up along your arm and out to your pinky. They're literally following that ulnar nerve that you just hit real hard. So this part here, that's the ow from banging your funny bone. All right, let's take a look at a slightly different view of these nerves. Make this a little smaller so it actually fits on the screen. And up here, we can see branching out from the neck and through that axillary region is our brachial plexus. Coming out directly in that axial region, we have our axillary nerve. What's the function of the axillary nerve? Well, what muscle would be located right here in the ball of the shoulder? The deltoid muscle. So this innervates the deltoid muscle as well as the skin and the joint capsule of the shoulder. So it's going to give you some of that axillary or shoulder innervation. Then coming along here, we can see some other important nerves. We have our radial nerve coming kind of out here and then twisting around to head backwards to the posterior side of that radius. So this kind of one that's like, looks like it's vanishing to the posterior side of the arm. That's our radial nerve again. This one here that's following the ulna and coming under that ouchie point, that's our ulnar nerve. This one here that's running all the way down the fingers and along the medial or the middle of the bone is that median nerve. So we do have one other big nerve visible in this view, and that's the nerve that's coming along this humerus and then kind of coming out this way. What's this nerve? Well, that is the musculocutaneous nerve. What does musculocutaneous mean? Well, muscle. What's cutaneous mean? Musculo is muscle. Cutaneous means skin, the cuticle, like the cuticles of your fingernails. This is your cutaneous membrane or your skin. So there's a good guess what it's going to do. It's going to innervate muscles and skin. And sure enough, it's kind of more up here in the brachium. It's going to innervate your biceps brachii. That's your arm curl muscle. It's going to innervate your brachialis muscle, the lower half of this humerus. That's also a flexion muscle. We have one other arm flexion muscle, the brachioradialis, but we already know what innervates that. That's our radial nerve. So what else is the musculocutaneous nerve doing? Well, cutaneous sensation. That just means skin sensation of the lateral forearm. And sure enough, it's on the lateral side of the forearm, so that all makes sense. So again, you can make some, if you know the location, you can make some good conclusions. You can draw some good conclusions about what they're going to be innervating. If you know what they innervate, you can draw some good conclusions about where they're going to be. And if you know their name, you also have some good hints about where they're going to be. All of this information fits together. So hopefully this helps you begin, start thinking about how to learn nerves in the body when you start putting all these pieces together and getting a more integrated picture rather than just trying to rote memorize stuff. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and call it a day, and we have now made it through all of the upper extremities. So I will see you next time to talk about lower extremities, the legs.